Imagine being born into unimaginable wealth, a fortune so vast it stretches from luxury homes to private jets. But what if I told you that wealth wasn't just about opulence and luxury? What if it also funded a global network of terror and destruction? The story of Osama bin Laden is not just the story of a terrorist. It's the story of a man who used his immense fortune and business empire to finance one of the most destructive terror organizations in history. But here's the twist. Bin Laden didn't just live in the shadows. His wealth was as vast and complex as his network of terror. So how did the son of a billionaire construction mogul end up as the world's most wanted criminal? And how did his money flow around the globe to fuel chaos and death? Stay with me to uncover the hidden business empire behind Osama bin Laden. The early years of wealth. Born in 1957 in Saudi Arabia, Osama bin Laden entered the world with a silver spoon in his mouth. His father, Mohammed bin Laden, was a billionaire who founded the Saudi Bin Laden Group, one of the largest and most successful construction companies in the Middle East, with government contracts flowing in from all directions. The bin Laden family had their fingers in many lucrative pies. From the beginning, Osama's path was paved with wealth, power, and influence. His family's construction empire played a central role in the modernization of Saudi Arabia, contributing to the country's rapid expansion following the discovery of oil. Despite this wealth, bin Laden was drawn to a different kind of power: ideological control. But before he became infamous for orchestrating terror attacks, he was already involved in business ventures that would lay the foundation for his rise to infamy. These early years were marked by a series of investments that seemed almost ordinary. But how did someone with a $1 billion family fortune end up financing terror instead of building empires of his own? It's time to dig deeper. Business ventures and hidden fortunes. In the 1980s, bin Laden's financial journey took a more hands-on approach. While he continued to hold some shares in the family construction business, his interests began to veer toward more covert operations. His move to Afghanistan during the Soviet-Afghan War in 1979 would change everything, but it didn't sever his ties to business, it only reshaped them. Here's the twist. While many associate bin Laden's wealth with terrorism, his early financial activities involved legitimate business dealings in countries like Sudan, Pakistan, and even parts of the Middle East. In the 1990s, as Al-Qaeda began to form, his business ventures took a more shadowy turn. Bin Laden was not just an ideologue. He was a businessman building an empire, using his wealth to fund a global network of terror. The role of construction and oil. One of the key ways bin Laden sustained his operations was through his involvement in construction. The family's legacy in this sector allowed him to capitalize on massive infrastructure projects in Sudan and other parts of the Arab world. Bin Laden owned a substantial stake in a construction firm based in Khartoum, Sudan, which provided him with a steady cash flow, funds that could be diverted to his terror networks. Bin Laden's role in Sudan was key. While he didn't directly run operations, he invested heavily in the country's infrastructure. He helped build roads and airports, often using these projects as a cover for moving weapons and supplies to various militant groups. And remember, this wasn't a one-off. It wasn't just one company. He had businesses in multiple sectors, ranging from agriculture to telecommunications, always with the goal of creating a self-sustaining financial system that could fund his activities without being detected. The network of shell companies and front organization. Bin Laden's financial empire wasn't built on obvious in-your-face businesses. Instead, he was a master of using front companies and shell organizations, essentially hiding his money and his involvement in plain sight. These companies, many of which were registered in places like the Cayman Islands and Panama, were used to funnel money to terror cells and groups sympathetic to Al-Qaeda's cause. These businesses were often legitimate, but the real profits were going into accounts designed to fund militant activity. From businesses in Asia to investments in Africa, bin Laden was able to move large sums of money across borders with relative ease. His use of banks in the Middle East and Europe made it almost impossible for international authorities to track his financial movements until it was too late. The dark side of wealth, terror funding, and Al-Qaeda. As al-Qaeda began to grow, so did bin Laden's wealth and influence. His ability to use his money for terror was unrivaled. But it wasn't just about buying weapons and explosives. It was about securing loyalty and creating a global network of operatives. Bin Laden's wealth was channeled into supporting attacks around the world. This included the 1998 US embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania, as well as the 9/11 attacks that would forever change the world. But here's the real kicker. While the world was focusing on the atrocities, bin Laden's financial network continued to operate. Where is bin Laden's fortune today? Now here's the question that no one is asking. What happened to Osama bin Laden's wealth after his death? How much of his financial empire still exists today? And perhaps most importantly, who's holding the keys to his fortune? The US government was able to seize some assets, but we've only scratched the surface. Was the fortune of bin Laden quietly absorbed into the coffers of rogue regimes? Could his wealth still be fueling terror operations right now in ways we don't fully understand? Bin Laden's legacy is far more than just violence and terror. It's also a legacy of wealth, influence, and power that few could comprehend. From his father's construction empire to his global network of shell companies and secretive investments, bin Laden's business dealings were far-reaching and continue to impact the world in subtle ways. So the next time you think of bin Laden, remember, the story isn't just about bombs and bloodshed, it's about the money behind the terror. The money that enabled one of the most sophisticated, dangerous operations the world has ever seen. If you want to uncover more about the hidden world of global finance, hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for the next video, because we're just getting started on this deep dive into the shadowy figures controlling the world's most dangerous industries.